Hello, thanks for joining us. I am here with Tim Tom, was it 001 on Twitter?
Yeah, that is right.
Yep, and he's a photographer and hobbyist, and we're gonna paint over this awesome Ridgerunner model. So we're kind of on a little impromptu. I had some notice, but I got swept away doing a bunch of stuff, so kind of didn't have a lot of time to prepare, but this should be fun. Do you have an army for these guys?
No, I've just started them this year after my adventure in making the Adeptus Titanicus armies on parade board at the end of last year. I decided that I wanted to think about something a bit more in advance. And I've loved the Genestealer cult models for a while, and so that seemed like a fairly natural army to go for.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the Genestealers. When I was heavy into White Dwarf back in the day, they were just coming out, so it was always one of those armies that I really liked. It was just them all getting infected and having different types of units and stuff. This model, and obviously to me, it shows you're like a photographer. And how do you even start? Like your lighting, is this? I don't know. It's so clean. Why is it so clean? I guess.
So it's a combination of two things. So I use flash guns. So obviously, not all of the photography that I do is Warhammer stuff. I used to do a lot of other bits and pieces. So I have a couple of remote flash guns lying around.
Okay.
So I think what makes it so clean is it's a very big open light source, and then a very white background. In this case, it's actually just pieces of paper.
Okay. Yeah, this thing that looks so cool. I haven't started really, like I wouldn't even say I dabble, but I have to start photographing more models myself. I'm like, I want to photograph them because then I can kind of set compositions and play with things and then
Mm.
try. So I've been ordering just the little lights to adjust to have different things and that, so I can start laying them out. So I was like, I'll start dabbling. So I was glad when you joined the Discord with such nice photos. I'm like, I'll have some questions for you.
Yeah, no, it's a fun topic. I mean, you've obviously seen in the Discord, but I try to take two types of photo, if you will, of models. Photos like this here, very clean white background, and then there's also the more kind of scenic photos, where I try to put them into a board, put a bit of context, maybe
Mm-hmm.
have them going against something else, a bit more dramatic lighting.
Yeah, I didn't see the until you just showed me. I think today the armies on parade board from last year. That I didn't know you had painted all those. I was like, that was incredible work.
I will say the Titans themselves I'd painted a lot earlier in the year. A couple of friends and I had got into Adeptus Titanicus in like March, April time, which in the UK was kind of a good time to get into a new army because you were locked in the house, couldn't really do much else other than paint Warhammer.
Yeah, I know. That's how I was live streaming.
So yeah, did that. Saw that as it was online, it played into my strengths of being able to take photos as well as do the board. So I put the board together and really enjoyed it. So this year's board is going to be like a quarry theme. So I'm
Oh, yeah,
slowly but surely making the models, and then like middle of the year probably start to put together a board of a little quarry.
I was looking at this and the dirt. So how did you do the dirt in like the tire treads? Is there like some sort of what is that?
That's the magic voodoo that is Forge World weathering powders.
Okay, okay.
So I'm pretty lucky with where I live. So I live in Sheffield, which is maybe an hour north of Nottingham. So up until this year, my friends and I have been to Warhammer World maybe 2 or 3 times a year as an event. And Forge World sell these the coloured powders that you can put on. They give quite interesting effects. So if you put a lot of the powder onto a wheel and then brush it off on the outside, obviously you end up with a lot of that powder sitting in the crevices.
Okay. I'm just looking. I got distracted. I was watching the live view, and I think I watermarked the YouTube videos, so the AE symbol is like over your shoulder. I'm like, I got to get rid of that watermark there. That was like really bothering me. Wolf Lord Lewis, thanks for joining us in the chat. And Maves, I'm so bad with pronunciations. It said classic Tom, putting every other amateur hobbyist to shame with his models and photos. Yeah, these are quite exceptional. I had a little chance to stare at them because I was like, what am I going to do? And I knew I wanted to do this one when you had showed me because the I love how you did the lights on the front right here. That's really cool to me. I'm like, oh, I can totally try to play into that. And when I look on the cockpit, it has that green, so I'll be able to do like a subtle green glow. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to do like maybe it's in that quarry at night and they're like, scouting around or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'd be pretty cool. The lights themselves, I can't claim any credit for the painting technique for those. If you look at Darren Latham's YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
then he does a tutorial of things like gems and lenses. So that's actually the method that I've used there. So I've
Oh,
tried to
good.
use
Yeah.
that now on the main glass of the cockpit as well.
Yeah.
But you see it a bit less because of the slight overhang of
Mm-hmm.
the top.
Hey, anyway, it gets done. If you learn something and apply it, then let's kind of get some more sand in here. How long have you when did you get what got you into the hobby?
So I'm sure, like a lot of people, actually, my dad used to be into the hobby quite a long time ago. So he used to have a little Dark Angels army. So growing up, that was always something that he was interested in. I joined in. I dropped out of it for a few years while I went to university and didn't really have the money or the time to do anything about it. And then hit quite a convenient timing when I left university and that started a job, so had some money to spend
Yeah.
on things. It coincided with the release of 8th edition as well. So a couple of friends were also getting back in. So really, it was this kind of very, very tight knit group of people who were also interested. I was friends with at the same time, who really, really helped with that. It would have been a bit different if it was just me plodding on by myself. Being able to talk with people about it pretty frequently in the local area has been good.
Yeah, that's what I didn't. I just impromptu kind of did live streams, and I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy talking to people. So I had a couple people on. I'm like, oh, I get to ask questions about the game and how they got into it, and I kind of liked that. It was just something rather interesting for me. Tom Williamson said, "Hi everyone." Tom, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
That's me.
Oh,
I can do both, be in the
oh
chat
yeah, I'm
and
not
also
even
on
asking
the stream at the same time.
I'm not at all, and that's one of the reasons why I was determined to practice a lot more, because I'm looking at the tablet. I have the switcher control, and then I'm looking at the PC to watch the feed and the comments. So and plus talking. So I'm like, all right, I need to practice this.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, you're having to focus on doing art at the same time. I just sit here and talk for a bit. I've got the easy life here.
Yeah, you already paid your dues making this model. What to paint? How long would this thing take you to paint?
Obviously, a lot of that depends on how much time I spend during the week doing it. I think the Ridgerunner took maybe 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
What I think this model in particular starts off pretty quickly. So the yellow is a really large bulk of the area, and that was done with an airbrush, so was done really, really quickly. Then just going through and getting all the detail bits done took a bit longer than I thought it would.
Yeah, that's a lot of little highlighting stuff that looks fantastic.
Thank you. It definitely pays off. I mean, one thing that I've realized, particularly since doing the Titans for Adeptus Titanicus, is just how much of an impact weathering has on a model. And I'm sure it's something that you'll appreciate doing this kind of art in layers, and that it builds up in the same way. You paint a very clean model, and then you almost put a layer of chips and bits, and then you put a layer of dust over the top of that, and it really adds to the sense of realism.
I can tell and I'm gonna end up painting some soon enough, this year. I just got so busy doing all these. I am as I do these, I study kind of or try to study like the techniques that the people are using, and kind of even just learn as I'm going. I'm like, okay, they did this, and then they put those highlights, and they did that. So I try to like reinforce my own, just mental process of how it would go when I paint miniatures.
Yes, it's certainly a good way to do it. A lot of people have. I always find that if I've got something that I don't know how to do it that's difficult, somebody somewhere else has almost always had the same problem as me at some point. So you just have to find them, see what they've done, see how it looks, and decide, actually, yeah, I quite like this. I mean, we've talked about it a bit in the Discord, but I try to take a lot of with the Genestealer cults that I've started. I've tried to take a lot of real world inspiration for these. So the very yellow vehicles try to be a bit reminiscent of Caterpillar. The cultists themselves wearing lots of orange is a very high vis industrial feel to them.
Oh, that's gonna be so sweet. I did, and you got it kind of pops off like the ground color that you have. You know what I mean? You got that very natural sand kind of look, and this is just sharp.
Yeah, it really stands out, I think would be the phrase I'd use. Bright yellow stands out against things.
Yeah, I dig that. The what you kind of just did you always like get into photography, or just one of those things, or did you start into it?
Yeah, again, my dad was dad and some other family members were loosely interested. Joined the photography side at university, and went from there. Really, took a lot of photos. So took a lot more photos. Took even more photos.
Yeah.
So photography's it's always been an interesting hobby. I do the occasional bit of paid work, but it is mostly a hobby for me. Comes in useful occasionally. So I work as an engineer, but occasionally I do things like portraits and publicity photos at work, which is kind of fun.
Oh, you get to do some. Okay, yeah.
Well, small company means that sometimes people need to do a couple of things they're not always used to, or they've got expertise in from outside. So that's quite fun.
Oh yeah, this empire knows that. I'm like, it's my crash course on how to, set up everything. I'm like, I'm live streaming now. Like, how do I set all that up? And yeah.
And then the interesting side of this pandemic has meant, obviously, I'm working from home occasionally, but still having to do a lot of video calls and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So this is actually the camera setup I'm using now is actually my DSLR plugged into my computer.
Oh, okay.
So I've got a zoom lens, so I can zoom in and out if I want to.
Yeah, I never even did much of that stuff either. I was like, I had a couple video calls, and it was so, it was like impromptu, and I'm like, the phone's like way too close, so my head is like huge in the screen when I answer it. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm like, crash course in all things video.
Yeah, certainly been a bit of a learning curve. I mean, even this is almost a year into serious restrictions in the UK and people working from home, and there's still a lot of people that I work with day to day really struggle on the technology side. It's not as intuitive as a lot of people sometimes assume it to be, I think.
No, yeah, there's a lot involved now, just with the way you gotta, even something like this, you're like, connecting from the phone and the iPad and to YouTube, then to you, but it blows my mind that it all works. The fact that we never spoke before, and it's just like, hey, invite you on, you send a couple links, and here you are live streaming. So thank you for coming on today.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you for inviting me. I really love the work that you do. It's a side of the hobby that I think is very unique. I don't think I've really seen anybody else do this type of thing. There are other people I know who take photos and all of that, but the paint over side of things is really interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised. I just started doing them for myself basically, and then and I should have figured other people would be interested because the hobby is so big now. You know what I mean? But it kind of took me off guard because part of me was like, oh yeah, they're gonna be like, yes, you just slap some paint on a photo, man. It's like, get out of here with that. Like that's kind of what I was expecting.
it's really difficult. I mean, you know, I do photography, so I've got a fairly good
Yeah.
grasp of Photoshop. But the way you blend things together so that the background and the model itself look like they're in the same thing is astounding to me.
Thank you. I know that that's it's fun because I think in this hobby, a lot of people have that. Even if it's not like, even if you're not doing it professionally or whatever, you all have that in common. So you're all kind of, the visual aesthetic and how you like to see things and how they're posed. So it's really cool, just like the interactions on, Twitter and stuff, that everyone talking about it, and you see different, perspectives and how they do take their photos and all that. So I try to like soak it all up as much as I can.
Yeah, yeah. It's a fascinatingly creative hobby overall. I had to explain to my girlfriend about it when I first got back into it, because she'd had no interaction with it at all from
Yeah.
anybody who she knew going through school and university. And so you explain it, and she's like, oh, "Okay, that sounds kind of interesting." And you're like, "Oh yeah," and also there's like one of these shops in.
Oh, I think your mic cut out. I think that might have happened on your end. I don't know if you hear me. I can't hear you, and I wonder if it's me. Did you hit a? Oh,
No,
there we go.
that is me. I figured it out. I'd actually switched my microphone off.
Oh, there we go.
Apologies, everybody.
No worries. I'm still getting in the flow. Perspective blur. I try to blur these tires, stuff like that. So in this, it's Procreate, and I isolate the tower or the tire, and there's this little circle here. That is, how do I explain it? That is the perspective point. So everything, if I really cranked it up from this point, the tire would zoom, and you can see where I move this point, it kind of focuses on it.
Ah, okay.
And so I crank it down, and I put it kind of in front of the tire. So I'm basically trying to fake motion. It's not like a true spin
Yeah,
on the tire, but you're trying to get the effect of it. And so the closer you are to the focal point, the less blurry you are, and the further away that you are, the more blurry. So this tire front should be less blurry than the back of it, when I undo it and try to add that bit of motion.
that's interesting.
Because I want to do that dust. I want to play up the dust that you put in the seams of the tires, and I want to have it kicking out of those seams, like it's that real, deep, like fine dust.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Really thinking through what makes things realistic. So that was one of my aims with the weathering here, is try and make it look conceivable. So like the vehicle had been moving fast, and then a bullet or a piece of rock or something had hit it and bounced up off the front of it. So I tried to make sure that a lot of the weathering's on very much the leading edges of the model.
Yeah, good call. Yeah, it takes a lot of crafting. And so you're doing this for Armies on Parade, or I mean, partly for that.
Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, I wanted to do Genestealer cults for a while anyway.
Yeah.
I think they're such an interesting army and such an interesting set of models. So I guess the Armies on Parade is most of an excuse more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. How many? Like, what is the? I know Armies on Parade, but I wasn't. How many points, or what's the? You know what I mean when you display the army? What counts as an army?
That's quite an interesting question. So the board itself has to be either 2 foot by 2 foot, or the slightly weird current size that Games Workshop moved to. I can't remember exactly. I think it's like 36 by 44 or something. The actual army isn't really very heavily specified. A couple of squads and a couple of vehicles seems to be pretty standard.
Okay.
So in the winners categories this year, there was an Ultramarines army that looked like most of a company, so almost 100 models. Then there was a Space Wolves army that was like 3 vehicles and two squads and a couple of characters. So it varies around quite a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Now there's the tapping. I'm still trying to figure out how I handle that. It's like I don't know how loud it kicks to the phone, and sometimes I have headphones on, but then it's even closer to me, so I'm still playing with the tapping when I start doing that.
Yeah, I think it's I don't think it's too bad personally. I mean, you know it's there, so you know what you're doing, but it's
Yeah, proof that I'm working. It's proof that I'm doing it.
not pre-recorded the difficult bit here.
Yeah. Did you? When's the last time you played a game?
We played a game in maybe July, August of last year.
Okay.
So there was a period where the UK, I don't know how much you've heard about the UK's coronavirus story, but we had a lockdown that started at the end of March last year, went on for a couple of months. Everything started
Yeah.
to open up again. So I had a game with some friends in my new house. In that
Oh,
time. And then in November we had a lockdown, and then January we've had another lockdown that's still ongoing. So
so you
not
got
doing the
like
best.
you got like a new house right before the whole everything broke loose or whatever.
No, we got a house in the middle of everything breaking loose. It was
Oh.
even better time than that. Yeah. Trying to, we're applying for a mortgage, trying to get, building surveyors going around somebody's house while we're in the middle of a lockdown and nobody's supposed to
Wow.
be doing anything non-essential was kind of challenging. But actually, it kind of all turned out all right in the end. We were able to get everything we needed to done. Nothing was massively delayed. So
Gotcha. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Myriad, thanks for joining. I I apologize for the watermark right over the guest's face. That is so annoying. Let me try something. I'm gonna try
it's
a
not
different
actually over
one.
my face in the end. It's not too bad.
That's off too much.
Maybe a little bit too much of me there.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna fix that. I didn't see that till now, so yeah, I want this. I want to play with these lights, and I always like I put that dark layer. So I put like a tinted layer over it generally, and then I erase some. That's kind of how I put the light on the vehicle right now. And
Hmm.
I'm always right now. I always want to kind of go darker and then bring back more light. So I try a couple different things, but it's like one of those things where you just I don't know. It's still not settled in how I want to approach it. I kind of we're gonna see. I want to this yellow. The yellows always look really sharp when you add the highlights. I'm going to add some highlights on them just to see.
So how do you decide colors? So a lot of your images, obviously, there's kind of an overall background color that's chosen. What process do you go through to pick that?
So usually I'm gonna like I will look at the majority color of the model, and this one is yellow, and I'm like, okay, obviously that's bright and it should pop. So then my first thought then is usually, okay, so darker background, have something darker so that I can force that yellow forward. And so you already had kind of your green and your blue in here, and since the model is a vibrant yellow, I was like, okay, the green and the blue, I'm gonna go almost with like I had that. Let me open it up here. Almost like this. I wanted a darker. It's almost like a teal. So this background's teal,
Mm.
but then it's desaturated a lot. So
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I almost take the color out of it, but it's still there. So then it's basically the teal color to go with the model, but then desaturated, because if I desaturate it, it brings even more attention to the model, and then I can maybe have like some explosions in the background or gunfire or something, and it still pops against that background.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I starting to try and think in terms of contrast in models as well. So color contrast, black
Yeah.
and white contrast, and I guess like saturation contrast is the one that you're talking about there that I've not really considered as much. Things
Hmm.
things seem brighter and more colored when they're put next to something that's more desaturated.
Yep. Yep. So that's one thing I kind of play with on that, because I think one of the things too is, uh, especially GW type artwork, there's usually so much going on, all the
Mm.
explosions in the background and all that stuff. So I've learned through with some of these is that the unimportant stuff, or the less stuff, I kind of want to desaturate, and then it just kind of pushes it into the background a little more.
Yeah.
You do a few hundred of these and you learn something.
Yeah, so I'm currently working on a Genestealer called Sentinel that's going along the very similar lines to this. So the Sentinel itself is going to be high vis yellow. The person is actually going to be dismounted as is again going to be high vis orange. Can't really see him there very well.
Is
On a slightly scenic base.
the Sentinel, so basically Sentinel, like the Imperial Guard Sentinel type unit?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's correct. I
those are
may
some
make
of
it.
my,
Sorry,
those are
carry
some
on.
of my favorite models.
I know, me too. I really love the aesthetic of it. It's it reminds me a lot of a lot of engineering. It's very simple, very rugged.
Yeah,
Uh,
it
quite
looks like
like
built to just get out there and survive. It's nothing fancy.
hmm. Yeah, so I'm making a couple of changes from the basic model though, just to make it a bit more a bit more civilian, I guess, a bit more
Mhm.
mining version. So instead of a las cannon, I've replaced that with a mining laser from one of the Genestealer cult kits.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've opened up the door and I'm changing the way the cockpit actually looks. So rather than being entirely open or entirely closed, it's actually open topped, but it's got the front still in place, so it acts as like a heat shield or a blast shield. Um,
Okay, that'll be cool.
Obviously, if you were driving it, firing a massive laser out the front of it, then you'd
Yeah.
want something to protect your eyes and all the rest of it. So I've tried to keep that element of it still in there.
And I think you had brought it up earlier about, you were bringing some of the real world like colors kind of in. And I think that kind of thinking and that kind of engineering real world skills can really translate, because there's little touches that unless you've kind of been around that equipment or know what it does or whatever, you can include that. And I think it adds another dimension to things.
Yeah, it's certainly good. It feels like one of the reasons why the Genestealer cult, both as an army and from a painting and modeling perspective, interested me so much is that they're not just, oh, here's another army. They go to war. They do war things.
Yeah.
They're, in this case, they're primarily miners who happen to also be doing a big uprising. A lot of their equipment is based on mining equipment.
It tells
And
more
trying
of
to
a
make sure that's
story.
reflected properly makes for a very interesting story in the models.
I completely agree with that because you're right. It has that, you know, it gives them more personality because it's not just, hey, we're here for war. It's like, hey, we got a mine, we got to do this stuff, and we got to fight an uprising.
Yeah. And the plan is to have that reflected in the armies on parade ball, that they'll be looking like they're just leaving their quarry base to go do some uprising stuff.
Yeah,
Not quite sure what the
uprisers
right
gonna
phrase is.
uprise.
Yeah, exactly. What else are you going to do on your Saturday afternoons?
Let's go get them. I just want to bend this antenna a bit.
Hmm.
So I just want to cheat some to add motion. There, let me see if that's enough. Yeah. Just bend that a bit. Now I'm going to try to play with these front headlights. I've been wanting to do this part. I want to see if I can get anything interesting. Go add. It took me quite a while to get some sort of process. The layer effects on these are a lot. So let me just do a quick example. Oh, that's kind of good. So the add layer I use quite a bit for the light because you can see how that light goes over it. And then sometimes I just scroll through to see the different effects because I might be able to do something like that. There you could use under some deep lights and stuff. and I just scroll through to see what effects it gives me.
Yeah.
Because I don't know them all. You know what I mean? So you're like, oh, let me just see what happens if I do that. The joys of digital.
Yes, just immediately change something,
Yeah,
delete it, add or remove the layer really quickly. It's lovely.
because I worked by hand so much, and that was the thing. And now you're. What was funny is way back in the day, it's like I would draw. You draw by hand, and you hold it up in a mirror to see the reverse of it. That's how you're seeing the reverse. And you go to Photoshop and you're like, ding, 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 ding. I flip them a lot of times. Like if drawing, I'll flip it back and forth because it's just how it. That's one thing. If you are kind of newer to art, is that if you're always looking at it one direction, flip that mirror image and you will see it in a whole new light. Like there's so many
Mm.
times I've been like drawing a face and I'm like, I can't quite place it. As soon as you flip it, you'll see, something's way off.
Yeah.
Your brain really does like a number on that stuff. See, that's two.
Yeah, I mean, it's that kind of thing. Something that makes a difference with how I choose to take the photos. So even pretty basic things like are the models moving from left to right in a scene or right to left can make quite a big difference to how you view things. I think in I've read before that in the Western world in particular, because we tend to read from left to right,
Oh, it
people tend
totally
to
is.
view images in the same way.
Yeah, that's a good point because especially I did a lot of stuff like drawing and I like comic books a lot. So there's a whole and in comics you're trying to make the reader flow from one panel to the next. So each composition in a panel is trying to when it's done right is kind of leading towards the other panel and it directs your eye all the way through. So I that's one aspect I've always enjoyed is composition, and like you said, like when you're setting up these photos, the real good angle of the model, like you have this one tilted on a great angle, so it already conveys that motion and it's not like straight on and everything. So yeah, this is a great photo for that.
Thank you.
Oh, I just bombed out of that layer. Gotta bring that back. I'm trying to I'm using a selection tool and marking out an area to kind of just control the light in there, and I want to try some effects and see if I can get anything interesting.
Okay.
I work in there, go here.
And this is Procreate, is that correct?
Yes, this is Procreate on an iPad, and obviously they don't pay me anything to do it, but I love the program. It works so well on that, and then I use this little program called Switcher Studio is what I am connecting with you and broadcasting to. And because I spent so much time trying to get it hooked up with other programs and stuff, when I found this one and it worked real good, I'm like, I will mention them because out there's some artist working on Procreate who wants to stream, and I will save you hours and hours worth of trouble. Just get this thing or look into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Chances are somebody else has had the same
Mm-hmm.
problem.
That is the great thing about the internet with that. You can find so much stuff. So now I'm putting
Yeah,
the
I've been impressed at just how easy it's been to join on to this as well. Just send a link, click the link.
Yeah, that's
Here,
what I
here
was
I am.
surprised by. I wanted to try it because it offered the option, and that's how I had a live stream. I'm like, oh, it gives me the option. I'm like, it seems easy. I sent it out, and it's like a couple link clicks, and here, and I can do up to 9 people in this thing.
That would be maybe a little bit chaotic, but
Yeah, but
interesting.
one or two, you know what I mean, just to have someone swing by is whatever. So, okay, I got something close going on here. My I always I would watch a lot of art, some artists, a lot, whatever. And they start working, and it's like they're drawing, and they would start with like a line, and they put out this beautiful drawing. My process is more like it's like clay, and you're like pushing and pulling a little bit. It's like, oh, what about here? It's like, no, I'm going to get rid of that or change it and alter it. So I kind of like try a lot of things and then wipe them out and retry.
Yeah, I do the same with when taking photos, particularly of large scenes that are trying to make look realistic. So in my photo catalog, you'll end up with like 10 or 20 photos of what is fundamentally the same scene.
Hmm.
But just with models moved, 1 centimeter to the left, or a piece of terrain moved very slightly, or one light moved very slightly.
Yeah.
Kind of trialing and erroring my way into what I actually pre-envisage at the start. I think the most common change that I make is moving a model that's either half cut off or blocked behind another one. But it's
Yeah.
a lot harder to see when you're looking down at something compared to when you're looking through a camera.
Yeah. Very good point. I know it's going to be interesting when I start setting some up for some photos, just to the composition, because that is one of my favorite. That's the old comic book fan and everything else in me. It's like setting the picture up and the whole scene and what you capture and everything.
Yeah, I quite enjoy. So I just enjoy taking over a table to do it. It's just really nice to put out the models on a board and work your way through making them look like showing other people how you imagine them, I guess, is what
Yeah,
I always think about it. You've got such a clear mind's image of how you want things to look and how you imagine the lore fits up with the model. And being able to show that to other people is one of the reasons why I like taking photos quite as much as I do.
it is true, and it is inspiring. Like I see all these and how everyone's does their army, and they talk about it. It's like, wow, that's so cool. They have this like everyone's creativity gets to imagine a different army or setting or whatever, and it makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's such an interestingly creative hobby. That's what I always find. They're just people you wouldn't expect to be very good at painting. When if somebody says I do a lot of painting, you'd always assume, oh, they
Yeah,
do it on a canvas or something. They wouldn't think of this as your first thought, I think.
no, you're absolutely right. You wouldn't be like, yeah, I do a lot of painting, and they don't think miniatures.
Which is a shame. Maybe in 100 years' time, we'll have entire galleries dedicated to
I
miniatures
mean,
painting.
it's getting there because yeah, it wasn't like this in '89 Golden Demon Awards. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously, as I said earlier, I have been around Warhammer World a couple of times, and the exhibition space there is something to behold.
I can't imagine. One day I'm gonna get out there. That's why I like talking to people in the UK too. It's like I live like my childhood vicariously through you. It's like, tell me about when you went to the store again. It was right down the street, and you just walked there. You mean you got on your legs and you walked over there? We were scrounging over here for stores.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Not
very different. I
anymore,
mean,
but before.
yeah, I guess internet shopping must make it a lot easier to get hold of things like this as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So we obviously the last few months in the UK, I think maybe for the second half of 2020 as well, quite a few countries like Australia in particular seem to be hit pretty badly by Games Workshop products being delayed due to storms, due to shipping
Yeah,
problems, due to Brexit, which obviously we don't have any of in the UK. It's very easy for us to go pick things up normally, apart from right now because all the stores are shut. But
hmm,
that's an entirely separate problem, unfortunately.
yeah. It's a long year, long couple years probably. And that's why I'm like, okay, I was determined. I'm like, I'm gonna do something productive out of this. You know what I mean? I'm like, it seemed like it was built to grind me down. I'm not falling for it. I gotta like do something.
Yeah, and I think that's quite important for people's mental health as well. I know people who've been working at home or even not working if they've got medical conditions
Yeah,
since like March last year. That's a really long time to not
it
you know,
is.
do very much for. I've been really lucky in that my job means I'd normally need to go into work with precautions, obviously. So actually, I've still been leaving the house every day, cycling to work for exercise every day, or most days.
Oh, that helps too. The cycling. I think we had talked about that before because I'm in here and I, I mean, lucky or whatever, but I was working from home before the pandemic, so
Mm.
at least I had, the experience just doing working from home. It's a totally different thing sometimes, and I can imagine if someone's not used to it, and especially if you have kids or something going on, you're trying to work, and it's like, wow, it's a whole different ball game sometimes working from home.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that people have to adapt to do properly. In some ways, I think I left university maybe 5 years ago. So actually, I still remember a lot of the, when you're a student, you do work at home, as much as you do
Yeah.
at university. That kind of falls away a bit when you go to work because you start being right. I go to work, I work from 9 till 5, I go home and stop again.
Hmm.
But it's kind of been interesting falling back into that pattern of changing how and where you work more frequently.
Does this thing have an exhaust on the back, I assume?
Yes, it does. They come out straight at the back. It's not like a
Okay.
stack or anything. It's just straight at the back.
Gotcha. That's another thing I like about having the guests on. It's like, okay, now I get to learn about the models. I can ask them questions.
So I'll talk about the model a bit more if you want. Actually, it's quite so.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
made a couple of pretty small changes to it overall from the standard Ridgerunner. So the set of lights that's on top of the cockpit,
Yep.
I added in.
Okay. Those three blue ones, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So I wanted it to be, I wanted more lights. I figure this is going to be moving high speed through a desert potentially at night. As much light as possible is a good thing. And lights on the top is very reminiscent of like off-road Jeeps.
Yeah, that's what I loved about them.
So I want to put that in, and then the antennae at the back rather than the standard weapon option is another one that I've added. I want it to be more like a long-range scouting
Oh,
command
that's
type
right.
of vehicle.
This does have a weapon typically on the back. I didn't think about that till you brought it up.
So yeah, I wanted to make it very very much my own, make it a bit more. This vehicle clearly has a purpose. It's not just something that we've got a gun on there or we're using it. And then the other bit that you can just about see in this image is the pack on the side,
Yep.
and there's one on the other side of the vehicle as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Like they pull up and they can go mining with it or whatever it is, raiding tools or equipment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of if you're going to be out somewhere for days on end, as I imagine some of these mining sites are a long way from where you'd want to be. Prospecting in the middle of a desert planet. You want to have a fair amount of equipment with you just in case something goes wrong, or or
Very
just
true.
need more supplies. So I wanted to put a bit more of that in there as well.
Good. I don't know the shape. I want to try to do this light thing up here on these, and so I'm. Oh wait, what did I use last time? I used the light pen or the light brush. And I do the same thing too, like something like this when I'm playing with the light. Um, I use that perspective tool just to make the light blend a little more together.
Hmm.
See how it's going to look.
So do you paint your own models as well?
Yeah, like 30 years ago. So and I've been wanting to, right? For me getting back into it, it kind of really started when the new Necromunda box came out, because I
Mm.
played and I always liked 40k stuff forever, just the world and that. And I kind of knew I wouldn't paint a whole army right away, but I'm like, a 10-man squad, and I love small combat like that, and plus in Necromunda your units can level up and stuff, and I just love that.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll get Necromunda. So then I bought some enforcers, and then that was around the time I kind of started doing paint overs, and I was like, yeah, I really should paint some models because I'm using everyone else's, and like I don't even have a photograph of one of my models with a paint over. And so bought an airbrush, like bought some more models, bought paints, bought all that stuff, and every bit of it is still in its box from like 6-7 months ago. I'm like sitting next to a huge compressor and a new Iowata airbrush and paints, and
Oof.
it's all sitting there. So I'm hoping to this year, because I wanted to get my enforcers done so I could actually play again. But
Yeah.
I ended up getting busy with this. I didn't know, people would necessarily even care about this, so I was like, oh, okay. And so I've just been busy doing that mostly.
That's reasonable. I think a lot of people have a lot of grey plastic at home that haven't made or painted yet. I mean, I bought most of the Genestealer parts at once because I wanted to be able to move bits from different kits across each other.
Absolutely.
What that means in practical terms, I now have like 3 painted models and a lot of not painted models sitting around on bits of model to slowly work my way through over the next 6 months.
Yeah, well, it seems like we'll have some time for it still.
Yeah, I really the Necromunda models are one of my favorite ranges, even though I don't necessarily play it.
Yep.
Same way as I like the Genestealer cult showing a slightly different side of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Necromunda does that as well. So I've actually got some models in my big pile of Genestealer cult models to convert to be like planetary representatives, like the governor's representative or
Yeah.
something,
I think
talking to the leaders of the Genestealers while they're off to do their gallivanting around the desert planet.
I think too. I see people. It's like the Necromundas make great conversion material for like almost anything in there. Some of them you can almost see cutting some bits off and putting them in the fantasy setting, and so it's like they have all these that can fit. So I see those like crossing over all over the places. So I think it's good for that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm feeling these top lights. That's why I put them on different layers.
Hmm. So, do you do many paint overs of fantasy models?
Um, I will paint over anything. It seems like in my feed, it is mostly 40k. Now I think about it. But obviously I do have some fantasy miniatures. I also did. I liked some of the new Star Wars stuff,
Oh
and
yeah,
so I did some Star Wars, and what else was I thinking of for the other models? But yeah, not too much. It's just I think mostly people put in 40k, and it might almost be some of my own fault because I usually like don't tag it or whatever. You know what I mean? But I
yeah,
definitely even some of the I've done a couple of the historicals. Those are a little different because this I'm more magical, more sparks, more what I mean, crazy
yeah.
stuff. Whereas historical, you're trying to match reality, so it's a little different.
Yeah, and I guess for a lot of the Warhammer 40,000, the Star Wars miniatures, where you put lights for interest is actually kind of easy. There are very distinct areas that, this is a light, this should be light, or this is a visor, a lens, or the muzzle of a weapon that light would be coming out of,
Yeah.
which is a little bit harder for somebody with a sword.
Yeah, no, very true. Very true. And they'll get some of the magical ones. I try to add that bit, but there's some cool sorcerers and stuff like that. But for the most part, yes, you are correct. Because, like, a big Titan or something, you put sparks all over it, dangling cables. Whereas, like, if it's a big, say, old orc, you're not going to have, that, so you got to come up with a magical. But GW does so good, developing their minis that they always kind of have something with that personality on it.
Yes, yeah. I've personally, I think that the miniatures they release for Age of Sigmar might actually sometimes be a lot better than the ones they do for Warhammer 40,000. I think the ranges they do there are quite incredible. Not quite of my personal interest
Yeah,
necessarily, but
yeah, the model quality itself is
yeah.
because that was one too. I don't know how long ago it was when they did the Age of Sigmar. I remember just sporadically seeing some of those orcs. I love the Age of Sigmar orcs. They look so, their armor's like this big and chunky and everything, and I really like that look a lot.
Yes, I think they. Trying to think of the other ranges. I really enjoy the. I can't remember what they're officially called. The Sea Elves is the
Wasn't
short
it Deepkin or something?
Yes, yeah, the Deepkin. I really like the way that range has been put together. Even the elves feel very, very fluid, very fish-like.
Yeah, I was so they kind of surprised me too with just since they reformatted the fantasy and they went the dwarves, the Caradon or whatever. Oh, I love those ships. I used to be an old dwarves player, and so now just to see them with floating ships have always been a thing too that I dug. That they just put them both together in this, and I keep staring at the models.
Yes, a lot of very, very nice stuff there. I very occasionally pick up something to paint because I quite enjoy just even doing the simple painting side of things. But at the minute, there's a little bit too much on my plate to want to pick up any more, unfortunately.
No, yeah.
The one of the new Lumineth models, the somebody in the chat might have to help me. There's a model with just a suit of armor with nobody inside it, and that kind of thing is an incredible testament to how they design and sculpt these models nowadays. Because it looks really believable that there's nothing there and that none of the pieces are actually connected; they're floating by magic.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about too. And yes, I agree. Yeah, that is a great design because they're just how they're touching the base and how they flow together. They create some awesome negative space.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. I don't even know. They got to have so many people working on those models.
Yeah, I think the each individual side has a different team who does it, and then there's all sorts of teams. So we've been to the New Year's Open Day before, and talked to some of the people there and what they do. So they've, in addition to the heavy metal painters who do the individual models, the higher standard ones, they also have army painters whose specific job sounds something close to perfection, which is to paint armies specifically to be photographed for the larger codices,
bigger battle
the
scenes.
interesting shots. So slightly less detailed, although obviously still to a very high standard, but a lot more models.
Yeah, I didn't even. Gosh, I know it's such a big company now.
Yeah.
I got all stuck on the light, playing with that light, and I didn't do the rest of it.
I always find it's difficult when there's a part that you it's not quite how you imagine it. You can't quite figure out how to sort it. Occasionally run into that when painting or photographing. It takes me a long time to work through that mental block.
That is because the blue light, and you're obviously faking light with this, and then when you go to cast those lights off, it's like, okay, they're going to be bouncing off that hood, and you know what I mean. The light beams would be a little coming at you, but not. So you're trying to cheat in different ways to achieve an effect, and if you're not, used to it, it takes a while.
Yeah.
I want to do these little glowing. I love that subtle little, and you picked it's such a good green, good color for it to make a nice combo.
It felt at one point when I was painting, it felt like I was only using the brightest set of colors. You know, there's a really bright yellow, really bright green, really bright blue. You can't see any on there, but the weapons are a maybe not a bright red, but certainly a fairly distinct red as well. It was just like, right, so we're all here for primary colors. That's
Yeah,
the only
and
thing we paint with now.
that's one of the reasons it was impressive to me is you actually pulled it off with all the bright colors, you know, because that could go garish real quick, you know.
Subtlety has gone out the window. I think
Yeah.
the weathering helped a lot. I think that again that
Oh, good
extra
point.
layer of realism and ties it together a bit.
No, yeah, that is kind of what does it because you took that and then yeah, that's how you got the realism through it. Good point. There. Just a little. And I've learned to if you don't know where you're starting or whatever, I pick one thing. I'm like, okay, I know that green's going to be a little glowy, so let me just go with a little glowy green right there. Don't try to like do a big light around it or whatever. It's like just start hitting on the things that you know you want to do. And if you get stuck, it's like, okay, move to the next thing and hit it. And then when you look at it differently, you know, when you look at it later and with them combined, you might see something that triggers a
Yeah.
idea.
So whenever I start doing a painting project of any kind, I'll always start with one test model. So going from I have this idea in my head, I'll write down the paints I think I'll need to use, and then swap it to do one paint test model. Does this look how I want it to look?
Okay.
And then kind of go from there.
Yeah, because doing this kind of quality and you're doing like a armies on parade, that's no small task.
Yeah, it's pretty tiring, as you can tell by the fact that it's almost the end of February. So 2 months after I started, and I've done two individual Genestealer cultists and this model.
Okay, so yeah.
So got a bit of a way to go. I'm hoping to finish the Sentinel probably by the end of this weekend, and then the
Oh,
rest
really?
of the Nephthite squad. Yeah, it's the Sentinel itself's actually relatively easy. So unlike the Ridgerunner, which is a much newer model, the Sentinel on the outside actually doesn't have loads of detail.
Yeah.
It's quite a large area and looks complicated, but actually in terms of the different textures to paint, it's all very much the same. It's a lot of yellow and then a couple of detail bits of silver. Yeah,
Did
the Ridgerunner was quite different in that there's a lot on the underside. The sides got parts to do. There's the guns. There's all the different green lenses that you've just
yeah.
talked about. There's a lot of individual components of that one, whereas the Sentinel's a little bit different in that regard. And it's also half done already, so that does help.
I'm just checking something real quick. There. We have some water. And all lockdown and everything. It's like I'm not used to having a conversation with someone, so my throat is even like, oh man, I'm not used to talking. When the throat gets a little sore after an hour and a half.
Yeah, I find that when I do work from home, I end up spending like 5 or 6 hours on calls on video anyway. So I've got
Really?
very used to kind of talking to yourself, batting back and forth between looking at my screen, which is over there, and then the camera, which is over here.
Oh, good. So you had some time to adjust and get used to everything like that. I don't know if I want them firing or not. Do we go for battle or do we go for moving to the location? I don't know.
I guess the question is, what are you going to do in the background next? I'm pretty intrigued by.
I don't know what. So I kind of wanted to pull off. I want some lighting, and I don't know how. Almost like there's like a rolling in kind of storm or something coming in the sky, almost like they're, you know what I mean, trying to go get something before
Yeah.
the storm gets in or whatever. And I'm gonna try it right now because it's probably a good time to do it. Let me try something on this layer. In some of these, I end up putting so many layers because I'll leave it and I'll be like, okay, maybe I will, like that or not like it. So leave it and then throw another darkening layer over it. So you'll have two tinted layers over it, and then you're like, oh, mate, should I erase some of the tinted layer or try to force light behind it? So it's like these the how which way are you going to get the light? It's like there's a
Yeah.
couple different ways to do it.
To try to remember which one's tinted layer 1 and which one's tinted layer
Yes,
2.
and that's the other thing I have to get better at is like what layer hygiene. I don't even know what you'd want to call it. Where it's like, okay, contain the layers, don't use so many.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. So I put squad photos together on a white background before, based on 10 shots of individual models, and then from there try to put some looking as if they're slightly in the background or further away by blurring them,
Yep.
and end up going through kind of toggling which ones are on or off so that I can work out which layer actually refers to which
Yeah.
model.
Did you ever use any like stacking software when you take some photos?
I haven't, not with these ones. I've used it before on macro projects before, but I haven't used it for any of these. I just tend to go with quite a narrow aperture to get
Yeah.
a lot of the model in
The only
focus.
reason I asked is I just a friend of mine, he takes the macro photography. You know what I mean? I know he used it
Yeah,
for a few things, so I was like, oh, I don't know if it still applies or if some people use
yeah,
it.
yeah. No, it definitely still does. I mean, I know for a fact that Games Workshop do that with a lot of their images. The fundamental of it is I'm actually quite lazy when it really comes down to it.
Yeah.
A model like this, I might gain a little bit of extra sharpness at the front and the back by doing a couple of stacked photos, but
Yeah.
for what I gain, it's a lot more effort when I'm just doing this for fun.
No, this is like
It still looks
perfect. I
pretty
couldn't
good
have,
anyway.
you know what I mean? You got one model here. It's kind of perfect for it. And I, I like, so sometimes they'll want a bigger battle scene for me for a paint over. And what happens is, in photography, you kind of have your focal point, obviously it's
Mm.
like your eyes, but I noticed if the units kind of at the edges blur too much, it's hard for me because it's easier for me to take a non-blurred image and add blur so I can fake depth and stuff than it is if that
Yes.
image is already blurred. I can't, sharpen it. It still looks like muddy, and it's so that one I did notice that on a couple trying to do a big couple paint overs. And what was I gonna say? Yeah, one of the things I tend to do in a paint over is at some point I won't have to do it too much on this one, but a lot of times on Titans and stuff, I just take a blender tool and I scuff up the edges and I kind of, what that means is I'm dragging like the background colors into the actual model itself, kind of like it's either little dust particles or a little bit of blur. Because if this thing was really moving, you're not going to focus your eyes on every piece of that
Mm.
machine and how it's moving. You're going to see a lot of blur and then some highlights. So I try to fake motion by doing that as well. Matter of fact, I'll do some right here.
Yeah, it's interesting trying to balance sharpness and realism. I think for larger army photos, as you say, I do some stacking to make sure everything's actually in focus, or at least approximately in focus.
Yeah, and I don't have enough photography experience, you know what I mean, to really put through the paces of okay, you got to place it, but I could see a lot of little adjustments and all that going on. If you like when you went to take a photo of this, how long did it take you? Just like okay, I'm going to set it up, I'm going to take a few photos. Like how long do you think that is for you?
Uh, a, a model like this is really quick and easy. It's just maybe like 15 minutes of setting things up and grabbing things
Okay.
out the cupboard, and then the actual photo was maybe a minute at most. Just a
Okay.
case of put it in front of the background, make sure that the camera and the light levels are right, and then take the photo. Something like a wider battle scene takes a lot longer because there's a lot more variables to play with. You know, this I wanted to be on a white background. I wanted it to be at an angle. The camera height was pretty perfect for the perspective that I was looking for, so it came really easily. But when you're doing a much larger photo, things like not just where's the main light, but where are the backlights? You know, what exactly what shade are they? Balancing those three lights can be a lot harder, and that's before you even get to the composition of the image, making sure that there's enough terrain and scenery in there to make it look natural rather than just one building on a flat plane.
Yeah.
Making sure that models look as if they're doing something rather than, oh, that one's facing backwards. Why are they running away, or is that just a mistake?
Yeah.
And then there's another step which so I have a small fog machine.
Oh yeah.
Which I occasionally use for the larger photos, and that is a case of right, you know, take a series of 5 images with little puffs of smoke, trying to work out where that's coming from, where that's going, and that's really difficult to get right. So what you end up doing is taking a lot of photos with that in place, and then doing a lot of Photoshop, getting the bits that you want with smoke and the bits you don't want to be, normal again.
Yeah, I wondered on that one. And you take enough photos where you kind of have a little spot set up already, like off for your photography stuff for these, or do you?
No, I am. So we've got an attic which is kind of like a spare hobby room which has got 2 desks in.
Okay.
So 2 tables, I should say. So normally they are clear. I just take over both of those when I want to take photos.
Okay.
All my stuff packs down pretty well. A lot of the stuff that I have now, when I was at university, I did a lot of photos of like end of year balls and events like that, where for me, being able to carry a couple of lights and the stands for them in basically just a rucksack or a small suitcase was quite important. So all the stuff that I have packs down really neatly anyway.
Huh. I know I'm still, with this whole live streaming thing, I'm still just getting used to setting all that equipment up. And I was like, people hop right on camera, like, oh gosh, if I gotta do camera, I gotta do some lighting, and then I gotta like sit straight, and so I gotta set up the process of that. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it, but I just gotta, first I'm like, let me get used to live streaming my screen, and then I'll do something where whatever, talk or show my face or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I've set up a small tripod on my desk, but that stayed there for the last 3 or 4 weeks because I've been doing so many video calls from home. So
yeah,
no, the photo setup moves in and out every time I need to use it. So what I tend to do is kind of wait a couple of months generally, do some painting, and then do a whole load of photos in one go.
Yeah, that makes sense because then you get it all out, set it all up, do everything.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I quite like the stormy aesthetic.
I was trying just some little kind of storm to kind of mix, and it kind of, I want it to match with the lights a little bit, so I'm not introducing any too crazy of colors or anything. A lot of this, sometimes like doing art, I can want to go too far. It's like, okay, let me add this and add more of that and put some of this. And I've learned it's just like, keep that focus on that model, introduce some stuff. And if it's a commission or whatever, like maybe I start introducing some buildings in the background, or maybe there's, some, so that takes like more planning and time with it. But my process is pretty much the same. And I still, even with that, I tend to want to keep that focus more on the vehicle than making like kind of like a more bigger cohesive picture,
Yeah. I think it still works very well. I think as you said earlier, you've got this feeling of a race against time, that it's driving through the night against a storm because it really wants to be somewhere. yeah, the fire or smoke coming out of the exhaust really lends to that as well. Like they're really gunning it, trying to get to where they need to go.
Punch it and go. Had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with too, even in our Discord with a few people like chatting about this stuff. It wasn't like I set out to be like, oh, I'm gonna, get active in the community or something. It was more, just happenstance, and it's been a lot of fun, a lot of creative people, and that it's good. I sit at home and draw a lot, and you miss that. There's a difference between I used to have like studio mates, and you get the creative energy of seeing what someone else is working on. They're getting a little excited, and then you're getting excited about something, or you learn something, and that. So this was a good way for me to get some of that energy kind of back. A bunch of creative people and working on something we all like.
Yeah, no, it's good. I quite like. So I've got a WhatsApp group of friends who are all into Warhammer as well, and that's really good. But it is sometimes also interesting to get some really different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
I've known these people for 5-6 years at least in most cases. So a lot of what they're good at, what they're interested in, what they'll think of things.
Yeah.
It's nice nice sometimes getting a slightly different perspective as well.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely.
some of the work that's going on in the group with the electronics trying to make that light up contraption is
Oh,
really interesting.
yeah. I've seen a lot with that. It's pretty crazy. Get some sparks in here.
You should title this piece "Raiders on the Storm" instead of "Riders on
Yeah,
the Storm."
it does. And it's fun because I do it, and it's almost you do a little like I like role playing games, all that kind of stuff. So it's my own little. You're figuring out the adventure as you're working on it. You know what I mean? It's like, what's going on here? Is he, are you trying to do this, and then you're coming up with your own little story just in your head as you draw.
Yeah, I definitely find that looking at some of the new Games Workshop kits, trying to work out what does this wire do. Is this bit like is this an electrical wire? Is this supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
a gas pipe? Is this a
Is
because
it
for me that
a
always affects how I want to paint things. If something's I want across an army, I want all of the things like electrical wires. I try to tend to make sure they're all in the same colors, in the same way that you try and make sure the armor's the
just
same
in the
color.
real world because they code them all, so you got the blow yourself up.
Yeah, exactly. So for this one, the all the electricity wires of any kind are trying to be this fairly bright green. So trying to work out, is this a wire? Is this not a wire?
Playing the wire game.
Indeed.
This is a little light back here that I like.
As a heads up, I'll probably have to head off in about 15 minutes or so.
No, and that's fine. We will head off here soon. I'm actually going to keep working on this one
Oh, cool.
because I want to do those track lights and everything. So I mean, we're going to end up finishing up here in a little bit, but I will get back to this one because I want to put the lights on. So I'm just trying to get a little more of the debris and stuff by the tires and some motion, and then we will be able to wrap it up here shortly.
That's fair enough. Are all so you're using a lot of different brushes to do this? Are these all standard brushes within Procreate, or are these ones that you've
So
made or downloaded
no,
online?
most of them are standard. The so all these all the way up to where it says this one sketching. All these below are all standard, and
Yeah,
those come with it. And then there was a set on sale. This is called F2. It was Frankentune. So they have it on Gumroad, and it's a nature pack. And so I bought these three sets. There was like because I knew I was like, okay, if I throw some trees in the background, I don't want to be hand drawing each little tree and some, so it's like I'll get some of that. And I use these a lot. So like random dirt, I use this splash quite a bit. and fire particles and the shifting smoke I use quite a bit. That's a nice smoke on this one. So that's in it. There's a couple other small packs, but I don't use the brushes as much. But that's one thing. Again, I'm gonna buy some more brushes because at first I didn't want to get a lot because you almost get overwhelmed with options. I was like, let me figure out what I can do with what I have first. Let me really get a good grasp on what I have, and then I'll start introducing some more brushes and different things.
Yeah, no, that's definitely quite interesting. I've always I don't really have any brushes in my Photoshop at all. So I always come to things. I'm like, right, I'd really like to try this technique. But I'm just like, I just kind of have a round brush, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Look
You
at things
just
like speckles and dirt, or like sparks and stuff. They're so much harder to do if you don't have a little nice speckled brush.
No, it's very true. And I started from the hand perspective. And so my instinct is always try to do it with a little, like almost like you're painting by hand. But then I had to get used to like they have whole brushes for this now that you can put dirt and smoke and like use those. It's the digital age, buddy. Get with it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating the difference in digital and traditional techniques. So I actually do quite a lot of film photography. I'm in the process of setting up a dark room in the city centre of Sheffield to be able to develop and then print my own photos there. And you've just got to love both processes for their own special quirks.
Yeah, and that's what, like I said, I started with hand and everything, and some people used to be like, oh, well, you're drawing digital, so they would think you're not putting in the work or whatever. But I'm like, if someone, you can tell someone who can draw, they're going to draw digitally or draw on paper, or you know what I mean? It's kind of one of those things. There are things you can do a lot faster. And that was why digitally, I'm like, if someone's paying you commercially, they really only care about end results. You know what I mean? It's like, it's get that thing done, by hook or by crook or whatever you got to do and make something that looks cool. So it's like, as far as that standard, it's like, okay, just I'll use digital and get that stuff done a lot faster for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, film photography is never going to replace my digital camera. I definitely find that it's maybe a very fun distraction. I absolutely, there's something particularly magical about doing it with chemicals that I find. Watching the image you've created just appear on this piece of paper feels incredible. It feels maybe a little bit more tangible than printing a digital photo. You have to put in so much, like it's very physical work. It's you dodge and burn in Photoshop, but those words obviously come from dodging and burning in a darkroom. Physically doing those techniques without quite being able to see what the end result is, and then being like, right, has it worked? Has it worked?
Yeah,
yes, it has.
That's and that's the same with me. To me, like I always loved comic book pages and there's nothing quite like on a piece of paper original piece of artwork. You know what I mean? That when you get, it's like, oh, that is so like just perfect. But this day age, like, and I know like comic book artists, they have a time to deal with it because a lot of them used to sell their pages, but now they're doing digital, so they don't have the pages to sell.
Yeah.
So, but it's like a trade-off.
Yeah, it's tough. I find it quite interesting. A lot of films are still filmed with. I was going to say a lot of films are still filmed with film there, which I realise might not make as much sense as it did in my head. But a lot of films are still filmed traditionally with 35 millimeter or bigger film. A lot of people still like doing that.
And I could see that, and I didn't even think about that lately. But you're right, because everything's switching digital, and they still, I think the film people who are really into it like talk about how it is on the celluloid or whatever.
Yeah, and that's an interesting factoid is that whenever old films are remastered, what they mean by that is they are rescanning the original film reels that were done and developed, because film has a very high resolution. It's much higher than people think. So there's a lot more detail that you can get by rescanning with more modern digital scanners than you used to be able to get. So that's actually what the remastering process is. It's basically just rescanning at a higher resolution.
See, okay, well, thank you, because I did not fully know that. So I appreciate that knowledge. That's another thing. Yeah, because it makes sense, because like the camera equipment years ago wasn't as good as what it is now. So they have, okay, interesting. Well, do you want me to let you go for now so you can get off and get some stuff done?
Yeah, well, in my case, stuffed I was actually eating food.
Hey,
A bit later on over here than it is for you, I'm afraid.
oh yeah, you're right. It's getting late for you. I will. I'm going to end up finishing up on this a little later. I just want to do that top rack and get the lights done and everything. But this was a lot of fun. So thanks for joining me on stream today.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we'll
It's
have
been
to
an
do it
absolute
again,
pleasure.
and I will see you out on Twitter. It is what is it? What is your Twitter handle and your Instagram?
My Twitter is at timtom001. Also, my name is actually Tom. The joke for that came that a lot of people by accident always used to call me Tim.
Okay.
I was in a couple of newspaper articles for sport when I was younger, and for some reason it would always end up being Tim. And then my Instagram handle is photos for the photo god.
Okay, good. And when you come on the show again, I'm gonna have the watermark off your face. Do not worry. So
I'm not quite property of Artist Empire
yeah,
yet.
no, yeah, I'm not trying to say anyone belongs here. I'm not trying to conscript anybody. Um,
I need
you,
to play it off as a very hardcore fan. I've actually got it tattooed onto my
yeah,
shoulder.
look, he tattooed it. He tattooed it. You have a good one, Tom, and I will talk to you soon online. I'm going to end stream, and thanks for everyone who joined us. I really appreciate it. You all have a